The World Health Organization says that by 2030, the biggest health burden on the planet will be mental ill health, specifically depression. Now, what price does that, or what cost will that have with the businesses that you run in this room? What cost will that have for the students who study in this college? What cost will that have for the family and friends relationships that we all have? They are massive. Whilst I was a member of Parliament, I put down written parliamentary questions, and the answers that came back were truly shocking. 30% of young people between 15 and 35 in the United Kingdom have one or more psychiatric condition. So consider, a third of this audience would have one or more psychiatric condition. In the United States, it's 42% and rising. What will happen when abnormal becomes normal? What price will it cost society? 90% of prisoners in British jails have mental illness. The issuing of prescriptions for antidepressants has shot up by 500% in the past 20 years in the United Kingdom. These are truly horrific figures. Those are the statistics. The stories behind those statistics are in this room, because there will not be one person in this room that has not been touched by mental ill health, by either themselves, a member of their family, a friendship ring, or a co-worker. It's out there and it's rising. And I believe that mindfulness can offer us a path, a way to minimize that suffering, and more importantly, or just as importantly, to help us in human flourishing so that we thrive and lead meaningful lives. Now, there are many theories as to why this tsunami of mental ill health is occurring and occurring now. The poet W.H. Auden in 1947 coined the term the age of anxiety. In 1953, a book was written called The Lonely Crowd. Some, like the British journalist and psychologist Oliver James, said it's down to advertising, that the purpose of an advert is to make you unhappy. Unhappy with what you got, so you'll purchase something else. Other theories by Robert Putnam, the American sociologist, says it's because of the declining socializing, that we work longer hours, we commute longer distances, we have less time for our friends, for our family, and just as importantly, for ourselves. Some say it's globalization, the uncertainty in the workplace, and that people are working longer. And many people are working longer. They're spending money they haven't got on goods they don't need to impress people they don't like. It's an hedonic treadmill. Some say it's digital distraction, that the actual computers that we all use, or virtually every one of us use, are having an effect on the brain. When I was young, my comparators were 5 or 6 mates in a gang. We looked at what each other had. We're all from the same council estate, from the same housing project. None of us had anything, so we looked at each other, and those were our comparisons. Now the comparisons are thousands or hundreds of thousands, with tweeting, you're friended or unfriended, you're liked or unliked, and it's having a massive impact. Others say it's the education system, especially in the West, where we train our children to be for exam fodder, so they can fit into the economy. Educating the whole child in many countries has gone out of the window. So those are the problems. My personal story, how I came to meditation, was through my daughter when she was age 12. She's 22 in a week's time. And she was studying comparative religions, and she came across mindfulness, and I was helping her. And then I started to look into mindfulness. I downloaded podcasts. I went on a mindfulness training course. I read about mindfulness. And I practiced for about 5 years. And then I decided, should I take this to Parliament for my colleagues? I knew that Arianna Huffington, I knew that Steve Jobs, the whole of Google, had used mindfulness in the business setting. I knew that Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods had used it in the sporting setting. Could it be used in a political setting? I was aware that Congressman Tim Ryan had set up a mindfulness practice on Capitol Hill a year earlier. Could we repeat it in the United Kingdom? We had a go, and it was successful, and we followed MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and we were fortunate enough to have as our teacher Professor Mark Williams from Oxford University. And he came down to Parliament and he taught MPs many lessons. Well, we followed the 8-week course. We had an hour a week tuition, 40 minutes a week homework, 40 minutes a day homework. And the lessons that we learned from that course have stood me in good stead. John Kabat-Zinn, when he visited Parliament in 2012, said, "Chris, I warn you, work on your parachute." And I thought, that's a good suggestion. And I have been working on my parachute. The lessons that we taught, and Mark Williams described it beautifully. He used his arm and his hand. He said, this is the brain, this is the head, this is the body. Many people live their lives like that. Their body in the present moment, their mind dragged back to the past. Some live their lives like this, their body in the present moment, and their mind in the future. And some people even walk like that to the next meeting. He said, we must try and use the breath and body as an anchor so that our mind and body are in the same place at the same time, taking in whatever is before us, the beauty of a sunset or a baby, a difficult problem. Our attention and our focus will be improved by using the breath as an anchor. We learned about the impact or the difference between positive and negative feelings and emotions. Negative feelings are 7 times stickier than positive. Negative feelings are like Velcro, and positive feelings are like Teflon. They just skip off. By keeping a gratitude diary, and I've kept one for 4 years now, I've been able to rebalance my life, to rebalance my perspective on how I view the world. And hopefully, my positive to negative ratio is far better than 7 to 1. We learnt about the difference between response and reaction. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, said that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space, we make a choice. In that choice, we choose our freedom and our growth. How many marriages have been ended because that gap was that big? How many people are in prison because of an immediate response instead of a considered reaction? How many business deals have failed? How many politicians have lost their livelihood because they said the wrong thing at the wrong time? So, and it is the amygdala. We learnt about the science of the brain. It is the amygdala at the back of the brain, that reptilian brain, that hijacks all of the higher emotions in the frontal cortex. And knowing about that, I think, is important. We learnt about nourishment and depletion, that everyone in this room will have activities that nourish them, and everyone will have activities that deplete them. In times of crisis, we ditch the nourishment and we add to the depletion. It's a downward vortex until we have a nervous breakdown or we just can't perform. So these were some of the gifts that we had. We also learnt about habits. Aristotle said, we are what we continually do. And I urge you, examine your habits. You'll have good habits and you'll have bad habits. And by keeping an eye on those habits and by breaking them, just for a week at a time, I broke my attitude towards caffeine by just giving it up for 1 week. And in the past 3 years, I don't touch caffeine. I've changed my attitude towards alcohol, towards work, towards chocolate, although you wouldn't think so. So have a look at your habits. We practice loving kindness. Kindness to ourselves. Kindness to our loved ones. Those are quite easy for some. But also kindness to strangers and kindness to people we don't like. These are practical tools. These are gifts of the mind that have been given to us. And I came across lessons in silence and stillness. I was the busiest, noisiest person I knew. I would visit my mother. I'm still quite noisy now. I would visit my mother. She's 92 now. I would come in the front door. She would go, rush, 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 rush. I have learned to sit and be still. Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher, said, most of the bad things that have happened to mankind have happened because man cannot sit in a room by himself. And it's true. I think we need that stillness in our life. So these were the gifts that I was given. And when I lost my job 18 months ago, John Kabat-Zinn emailed me. How are you getting on, Chris? How are you handling this tragedy, personal tragedy? I wrote back, John, I have been working on my parachute. I have opened my parachute, and it worked. So, Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. So I took mindfulness to Parliament, and we over the past nearly 4 years, we've trained 130 MPs in mindfulness. We've trained 220 members of their staff in mindfulness. And Marion Furr, a civil servant in the United Kingdom, has trained 2,000 civil servants in Whitehall. We've scattered mindfulness seeds over the whole ecosystem of political decision-making in London, in Whitehall. And we're hoping those seeds, they're only small seeds at the moment, but we're hoping those seeds will grow and grow. Those 130 MPs also asked the question, or wanted to be the change they wanted to see, and they took action. We formed a cross-party group in Parliament, a cross-party mindfulness group, uniting left and right for a common cause of lessening suffering and increasing flourishing in British society. We decided to have a parliamentary inquiry into the uses of mindfulness, and we produced this document, A Mindful Nation. And I urge you to go online. This was a document which was produced in Parliament with the support of about 35 mindful advocates who gave up their time and energy for free. We conducted this report. We had 8 evidence sessions. We had 80 expert witnesses. And the back of this, and especially online, are links to 240 scientific papers which can prove the science behind it. We looked at the areas of health, we looked at the area of education, criminal justice, and the workplace. And we made recommendations to government that they actually improved or took forward our suggestions. And to be fair, when this document was launched, I'm a Labour MP, or I was a Labour MP, when this document was launched last October, there were 3 Conservative ministers, including the Education Cabinet Minister, who spoke at the launch of that document. So it is being taken seriously. We've had progress within the past year. We've had progress in many of those areas, and we're looking forward to greater progress in the future. And it's not just about what we're doing in the United Kingdom. There is best practice around the world. In Australia, in Monash University in Melbourne, they have introduced mindfulness for the past quarter of a century. They noticed that when their medics were going out on their first internship, between 50 and 75% of them suffered clinically through stress, anxiety, or depression. That's your trainee doctors, up to 75% of them, whilst they were trying to learn their trade, were learning suboptimally. So they introduced it, they measured it, and it had a dramatic effect. It was so effective that it has now been extended to 11 other departments. It's the most mindful university in the world, and we're hoping to spread that best practice. John Kabat-Zinn has been working for 40 years on the science of mindfulness, and Richie Davidson too, and the work that they're doing in prisons with the MFIT program for the armed services and with emergency responders should be looked at. And that's what we hope to do. We hope to take the best practice around the world and bring it together. In April, I met with Congressman Tim Ryan in Washington, and he was aware of the work that we've done in the UK Parliament, and we're also working through the Mindfulness Initiative with 26 other countries, with advocates in 26 other countries who want to take mindfulness to their parliaments. So Tim has suggested that by 2019, we have an international conference or congress of people, of politicians who personally practice mindfulness and who want to take mindfulness into their parliaments and into their policy-making or decision-making process. And I think if we can achieve that, we if we can spot where the best practice is and leverage it up in other areas, and it's not just Western Europe and the United States, it's South America, Austria, and even in the Arab world, there is interest in mindfulness in the political process. And if we can do that, if we can make more mindful politicians, who make more mindful decisions, who connect to their innate wisdom, who are well balanced, then I think it will make for a better world, better decision making. If they can take it one step further and put it into their decision-making progress, then I believe Mark Williams's book, the title of it, is Peace in a Frantic World, and I think we could achieve that. Thank you very much.